I'm Representative Julie von Haefen. This is Senator Lisa Grafstein. We represent District 36 in the House and Senate 13 in the Senate. And our districts cover basically southern Wake County. Mine goes from Apex through Holly Springs and Southern Cary. You can tell what yours does because I can't keep track. But well, I'll just speak for myself. We had a briefing from the Budget and Tax Center about a month ago, I guess now it's been, on the upcoming budget season, what North Carolina's budget is going to look like, what kind of obstacles, I guess, we're facing going into this fiscal year. And it was very eye-opening, and I learned a lot. And I thought, this is something I think a lot of people should be more aware of, and that should be, I think it'll be very educational for my constituents and anybody who wanted to come. So I really appreciate you coming to learn. We are heading into our budgeting season in the North Carolina General Assembly right this minute. And so this is very timely. And also, as you know, we've been hearing a lot of what's going on in the federal government and potential federal budget cuts that are coming both at the federal level and at the state level. And so I wanted them to talk a little bit about that. I'll let Senator Grafstein say a few words, and then we'll turn it over to Heba from the Budget and Tax Center to do her presentation. After that, we're going to give a small presentation about what budgeting, like the reality of what budgeting looks like in the General Assembly, and then take your questions. So I appreciate if everyone signed in. If you didn't, you can either do it on the way out. Both of us have a newsletter that come out of our legislative offices that you can sign up for if you put your email on there. I think mine's good. I haven't seen yours, so it's probably as good as mine. We have good newsletters. I will just say, that mine comes out once a month. How long? When do you put yours out?
Spirit moves,
Random.
3 or 4 weeks. Yeah.
It's like a present. It just appears in your inbox. You're very excited. Mine comes out on the 15th of every month at 5 o'clock. We're very scheduled. Maybe that's a difference in our personalities. I don't know. But so ours comes out, like I said, every month, and it's really good. It's really good. My assistant Josh is standing in the back. So if you ever call or email my office, that's who you're probably going to talk to, and he puts it together. We work together on it. But so please sign up for our newsletter, and then I have a bunch of wonderful volunteers, local high school students. I love having high school kids come out and be involved in political activities. They are handing out index cards with pens if you need one. That's how we're going to do questions tonight instead of raising hands and all that. So if you have a question, please write it down, and they'll come around and pick those up as we're doing our presentation. So I'll turn it over to you to say your words of welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you, Representative von Haefen. My ambition is to be Representative von Haefen when I grow up. I'm Lisa Grafstein. I do serve Senate District 13, which is a little bit of Apex. It's about half of Holly Springs. It's all of Fuquay. It's a little bit of Garner, some of Knightdale somehow, and then a lot of unincorporated Wake County. So thank you all for being here. It's really, you have to be a hardcore policy nerd to show up for a budget talk, so thank you for that. And I see some familiar faces, and I can verify that that's the case. But really, it is really a critical time in our country and in our state, and I really appreciate Representative von Haefen putting this together. I really appreciate the Budget and Tax Center for the work that they do to help make sense of $34 billion that is our typical budget in the state. It's a lot of money and a lot of detail, but being able to see sort of the big picture of what it means, I think is important for all of us, not just as lawmakers, but as citizens. So thank you for taking the time and investing the energy in figuring out this stuff with us. As Representative von Haefen said, with everything going on, changing daily at the federal level, having a grounding in what the structures are, I think is really important, so it doesn't feel like chaos all the time. I mean, that's when new things come at us, it's hard to put it in context. So I think this will give us a little bit of an ability to put that in context. So with that, do you want to introduce?
I forgot to say one thing, and that is This presentation is being recorded. That's my legal statement. So, so I also wanted to thank very much the town of Apex, Alan Coleman, and everybody else for hosting tonight. And I wanted to shout out our 2 council members that are here, Ed Gray and Arno Zegerman. Give a little wave. I don't think we have any other electeds. They didn't show up. I can't believe it. I know. No. So thank you, Alan, for hosting. But this is being recorded, and so if for some reason you don't want to be on camera or like say anything, just kind of stay back there, and you won't be. But I'm going to upload the presentation tonight to my YouTube channel. So if you have neighbors or friends, family that was not able to come, and you leave here and you're like, oh my God, that was amazing, you have to watch this, it will be on my YouTube channel, which is @JulieForNC, which is all my social media handles. So with that, I will turn it over to Heba Atwa from the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center to do an amazing presentation on federal and state funding impacts on the people of North Carolina.
Hi. My name is Heba Atwa, and I work for the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center. And
Is that working okay?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So being into fiscal policy used to be dorky, but this is like the moment for our issue, and it makes me so happy that people are starting to get into it. And so the first thing I should say is that I mentioned to Representative von Haefen that my slide deck was originally like 100 slides. So I'm not going to be able to say everything that I want to say tonight, and I'm not going to be able to give you all of the information that I think that you should have. But our website, northcarolinabudgetandtax.org, has tons of resources for you. And you're going to see my email at the end of this presentation. You may email me, and I can try and connect you to resources so you can get more information. So let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, I work for the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center. We're a nonpartisan organization. We're a nonprofit organization. And we are concerned with documenting economic conditions, and we are interested in urging state lawmakers. We primarily focus on the state budget and state tax policy, and urging state lawmakers to pursue fiscal policy that benefits the well-being of all North Carolinians, no matter what they look like, what they believe, where they're from, who they vote for. So we're primarily concerned with how much taxes are being collected, who is paying, do we have enough, adequate, are we raising adequate revenue, and are we raising it equitably? How are the dollars divided up across priorities, and where is spending targeted? Which communities are receiving funding? So I don't know if you can see this. I'll read a few of them, but these are a few quotes that I hear just as a resident of North Carolina. I'm a mom, I have 3 kids, so I'm in like moms groups, parent groups, stuff like that, and these are the sorts of things that I hear. I'm an early childhood educator. I can't afford to put food on the table. I was laid off and I can't get help. My kid's school closed again. We don't have a bus driver. I can't afford childcare. I'm a public school teacher. I have to take a dispatching job so I can stay home and watch my kids while I work. And I'm sure y'all have heard a lot of things like this. I can't afford my rent. My landlord is passing on increased property taxes to me. Here are some headlines. You get so little. Recent report shows NC teacher pay lags behind national average. Bus driver shortages, Durham public schools closing, state is losing more than $5 billion per year due to lack of childcare. So you might ask, let me go back, you might ask, why do we at the Budget and Tax Center care so much about taxes and the budget? And we care so much about fiscal policy and taxes and the budget because fiscal policy impacts almost every single one of us. And in almost every single aspect of our lives, from getting a good education, to water quality, to putting food on the table, to having sidewalks in our community, to being able to stay in our house and afford our property taxes, to election administration, to having a park to take our kids to, and libraries. I mean, just about everything. So let's talk a little bit about tax policy in North Carolina, and this is going to be kind of a crash course. So in 1921, North Carolina implemented the first income tax, and it remained basically unchanged until 2013. And that's when we started to see pretty quick rate reductions over the last, decade or so. And this graph shows that, can you see that? You can? Okay. So it shows that we had a graduated personal income tax rate in. Can you use that mic? Is it picking it up now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let me move it. So we had a graduated income tax rate, so higher incomes paid a larger percentage. So top incomes paid a rate of 7.75%. Lower incomes paid a rate of 6%. That's going to drop down. Income tax rate reductions are being phased in and until 2030, and we'll see the lowest rate in 2030 to drop down to 2.49%. So that's personal income tax rate reductions.
Can you use that mic? 'Cause it's
You
not
can't.
picking up on the video.
Oh no. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about thanks, about corporate income tax rate reductions. So you'll see around the same time, 2013, there began corporate income tax rate reductions. We have a scheduled corporate income tax elimination to be fully phased in 2030. So starting in 2031, we will have no revenue from a state corporate income tax. So I just want to tell you the amount that we will have lost and we will continue to lose. So from the tax cuts that I mentioned over the last decade or so, we lose about $18 billion, and that's annually, from both personal income tax rate reductions and corporate income tax rate reductions. Ones that I know. Exactly. I am with you, 100%. Now, once we get to 2030, with the further rate reductions on the personal income tax and the corporate income tax elimination, we will have an additional $13 billion in revenue we will not be collecting. And I want to make something clear about the corporate income tax. I think that the prevailing narrative is, well, if you give corporations tax breaks, then jobs are created. Well, that promise isn't really borne out. We know a couple of things. We know that the vast majority of job creation in our state happens from homegrown North Carolina smaller businesses. We also know that 9 out of every $10 that we will give away in this elimination will flow out of state, because this is a corporate income tax, and your lawmakers can talk to you a little bit more about how that is structured. But we're not talking about small businesses. We're talking about large businesses that are structured as corporations, many of which have out-of-state shareholders that are benefiting from this. So those dollars are moving out of state. Okay, so this demonstrates, I'm sorry, I'm talking and I'm not moving the slides as I talk because I'm getting excited, but this demonstrates to you what I was just talking about, the amount of revenue that we have lost and the amount of revenue that we will lose. Let me make sure that I made all the points that I wanted to make. Okay, so who is paying taxes in North Carolina. So the richest North Carolinians pay the lowest share of income tax in state and local taxes. So I want to make a couple of points here. This is total taxes. So this includes, property tax, sales tax, because of course lower incomes pay a larger share of their income in things like property taxes and sales taxes. So I'll just read a couple of the numbers on this chart. So the highest incomes in North Carolina, around $700,000, pay 6%. The lowest income, the lowest 20% pay 10.5%. And I just want to mention that income is $21,600. So that's a pretty massive difference. I also want to make the point that North Carolinians, by and large, support investing in the programs and services that provide well-being and opportunity for us all, like childcare, like public education, like elections, like clean air and water, so on and so forth, the things that help us have a great quality of life. And this is across political persuasion. I'm not talking about one group or another, or folks that voted for someone or voted for another. This is across political persuasion. This is what North Carolinians by and large feel, and by and large really would like us to keep that revenue from the corporate income tax. They would like us to pause those rate reductions and have corporations pay what they owe. I should make one more point here that our lawmakers may make, but even the chamber, for example, the North Carolina Chamber published, we did not ask for 0% rate. We did not ask to eliminate the corporate income tax rate. We asked for a competitive rate, and we would really like to see investments in childcare because, of course, we know, workers need childcare. These are the things that help us to have a healthy economy. And, of course, the most vulnerable are impacted the most. As I mentioned, higher incomes are paying less. Lower incomes are paying more as a percentage of their income. Okay, so that is on the state side. That's kind of the picture where we are right now. So on the federal side, we know that there are executive orders, there are federal funding freezes. So that's I might conflate a little of this tonight, so forgive me. But as I mentioned, we have resources that make things very clear. So when I talk about harm, I might conflate the budget process, the federal budget process, and some of the funding freezes and the executive orders. So we know that the federal funding freezes and the executive orders, we don't necessarily know the status and the legality of those and if they will end up being permanent. We know the congressional budget plans, although, y'all know that a continuing resolution was passed, and y'all know that a continuing resolution is like a stopgap. It's not a permanent budget, it's just a stopgap to keep the government running until September 30th. However, the real budget plans are kind of suspended in space right now, those budget negotiations. Now, those could make some of the funding freezes legal and permanent, make some of those cuts legal and permanent through the budget process. Okay, so what is the result? The result is a cost shift to states. A result is real harm to people and our economy. So we need to think about things. I'm sure a lot of you, what I hear a lot in the news is about programmatic cuts. So I hear specifically about Medicaid a lot. We need to think as residents of North Carolina, not just about the harm to the beneficiaries of that specific program, but also to rural hospitals that rely on that funding. We need to think about doctors and nurses and other medical staff that are employed by those hospitals. Of course, this is a ripple effect across our economy. Federal funding in our state matters. So I believe that Senator Grafstein quoted to you the general fund amount, and she quoted about $35 billion. So you'll note that North Carolina received roughly the same amount in federal funding in 2024 as our entire state general fund. So basically equivalent to our entire annual state budget. So that's pretty massive, right? Those dollars really help to keep our state functioning. We need those dollars. And what is the goal? So the goal is to extend, the goal of these cuts is to extend the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act tax cuts. So the corporate provisions, the corporate tax cut provisions were permanent. Because of the rules, the budgeting rules, the personal income tax cuts could not be made permanent, and the cost kind of ballooned. So the cost is increasing, and they were delayed, and they will expire at the end of this year. So in order to extend the Tax Cuts and Job Act, we would have to cut from somewhere. There's also some rumblings about maybe expanding some of the cuts, but I don't feel comfortable enough really saying that that's definitive, because I think it's kind of rumors at this point. So the largest beneficiaries from these tax cuts will be the wealthiest. So this graph shows shows a percentage change in after-tax income. So I want to just tell you, you can see the percentages, but I want to just mention kind of the dollar figures. At the top end, it's a cut of around $60,000, and at the low end, it's a cut of about $70. And we should make clear that the extension of these tax cuts will cost trillions. It will increase our deficit, and it will increase what we call our fiscal gap by 50%. So our fiscal gap is what the amount in taxes that we need to collect versus what we are actually collecting. And we have amassed, I don't know if that's quite the right word, but we've amassed a fiscal gap from tax cuts in 2003, 2007, and 2017. Okay, so I did a little bit of research about some of the recipients or folks that are part of various systems in our state that rely on federal funding. So there are around 250,000 students enrolled in, this is just UNC, the UNC system alone, about 400,000 in community college system. Of course, they rely on federal funds. 3 million total Medicaid enrollees, 2 million Medicare enrollees. There are 600,000 that have coverage due to Medicaid expansion. There are more than 1 million households that have food on the table with the help of SNAP, and we have more than 84,000 federal workers. Of course, not contained in that number are the number of contractors that we have, or folks that are working on a federal grant. I just spoke to a friend last night who does not work for the federal government, but works as a researcher, and he's facing I guess lighter work duties, you would say, and a lot of his colleagues have been laid off, and he does not work in the public sector. Okay, so we've heard a lot in the news about, you'll hear, you'll watch a news report or two news reports and you'll hear, they're gonna cut Medicaid. And then within 5 minutes, you'll hear, they're not gonna cut Medicaid. And you think, okay, I feel like I'm being gaslit here. Like, what's going on? How can the two things be simultaneously true? They kind of are simultaneously true. So I'll explain what I mean by that. So as I mentioned, what we have right now is this continuing resolution. It's just a stopgap until September 30th. It's not really a permanent budget. We have to go through a reconciliation process at the federal level. What does reconciliation means? It just means, just think of like the common sense definition, getting along, right? We have to agree. So we have to basically agree on a budget framework and kind of subtotals in categories and a grand total. So has anything been cut? No. However, common sense dictates, and we know from the committees that have been tasked to cut things and the programs that those committees oversee, that it would be absolutely impossible for them to cut the amount they're being tasked to cut without cutting those big ticket programs. And so this slide gives you, can you read it? Is it too small? Okay. Do you want me to read it to you? Okay. So in the Senate, directs 4 committees in the Senate, including those with jurisdiction over, Medicaid, SNAP, student loans, and certain energy resilience programs to make cuts totaling at least $1 billion each. In the House, Energy and Commerce Committee, $88 billion, Medicaid, other health programs, Agriculture Committee, $230 billion, SNAP and food assistance, Education and Workforce Committee, $330 billion, student loan assistance, education funding. Other committees, an additional $60 billion in cuts. So does that make sense, how those two things can kind of simultaneously be true? Maybe it has not happened yet, but we know we're headed there. Okay, these budget resolutions are unpopular. We know that, right? We know that in North Carolina from our own polling about what residents care about. They care about programs that help people thrive. We know that even the reports that I just mentioned, congressional members are trying to hide these cuts by saying, no, nothing has been cut, without, telling the full truth that, well, it would be impossible to make the cuts that we have to make in our committee without cutting these very popular program. And we know that our state lawmakers, as I mentioned, will be left holding the bag, right? And we also know that North Carolina can't absorb this cost shift. So I mentioned the dollar figure that we received, in 2024. I mentioned that it was roughly equal to our entire state budget. And I'll just note, Medicaid services for most has been 90% paid by federal funds. SNAP assistance has always been 100% federally funded. We're concerned that disaster response could be moved from FEMA to the state. Of course, that's very concerning after, recent events in our state in Western North Carolina. We know that the Department of Education could be eliminated. So remember that there was an executive order, but the department cannot actually be disbanded through executive order, but of course, potentially through other machinations, potentially just very underfunded. We know that public employees will lose earnings. We know that there will be less money circulating in local economies. I also mentioned, contractors, for example, that work in the private sector but do work federally adjacent. And we know, as I mentioned, there will be ripple effects through the economy. And we know that state leaders will be left to figure out how to help us not be harmed in our daily lives. Here are some federal dates to remember. There's a congressional recess in district work. So a recess generally just means in district work rather than, a vacation. So April 14th would be a great time to interact with federal lawmakers. We know, as I mentioned, September 30th is when the continuing resolution expires. And then December 31st is when the Tax Cuts and Job Act tax cuts expire. So what can we do? We can ask our state lawmakers to pause those state personal income tax rate reductions and corporate income tax rate reductions that are costing us and will cost us so much money to try and mitigate some of the harm to our state. We can support bills that would ensure an open, transparent, and people-centered budget process. Your lawmakers are going to talk about the reality of the budget process, that it's less than transparent. And we really need to understand what's going on. We really need to understand what our lawmakers are funding and why. And we need to be able to have, for example, a public comment period. And we really need to be sure that our lawmakers have the time that they need to review budget documents so they can do a great job of representing us. And then, of course, we need to encourage our federal lawmakers to reject any cuts to the programs that we really care about. That's the end of my spiel. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope this just got you more and more excited to become a fiscal policy wonk. Join us. And yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I think I'm just going to use this.
Everybody breathe.
You can just put it there. Oh, I have to switch over. You want to say a few words while I'm doing this?
Sure, I'll say it. You want me to operate that for you while you talk?
I can do it, but now I think I just messed it up.
Well, I'll just point out, so I haven't mentioned the state budget and that we don't often get a lot of time to review it if we're not the folks who have the pen. We brought, these are, we do a biennial budget, so every 2 years, and it comes in a book like this. And actually, it's two books. One is policy, and one is actually there's the
So like these two
numbers.
Like the
That's
budget,
one,
basically.
right? And so this is all just iterations of the last budget because somebody changes a comma or moves something, and they reprint the whole thing and deliver it to your office. So help yourself when you leave tonight. Feel free to take some if you want to see what the actual budget looks like. It's kind of interesting, I think, but not interesting enough to keep all these copies in my office. So they're free.
I mean,
It's
we're
actually-
killing a lot of trees.
Your
here.
tax dollars at work, right? Okay, did I waste enough time for you to get your slides up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about, like, to kind of bring it down to, like, the ground level. Like, that was, like, whoa, like, way up here, lots of numbers floating around. But I want to talk a little bit about, like, how does this document actually get produced? And I think it's always shocking to people, how little input that Senator Grafstein and I have in our state budget, being members of the minority party, and how did we get there, and what should it look like? And then if you have questions, we've collected some, but my volunteers just hold up your card and they'll come around, and after we're done, we will start answering some of your questions. Oh, hi, I'm Julie. I have served as your state representative for District 36 since 2019. I do serve on the Appropriations Committee, which is the committee that does our budget. And all of our House members, and Senator Grafstein can talk about the Senate process because I don't even know how they get on their committees. But so basically in the House, all 120 members are either on Appropriations Committee or Finance Committee. Our Finance Committee is the one that hears bills, how we take in money, and Appropriations Committee members decide how it goes out. Most people, like I think 3/4 are on appropriations and about 1/4 are on finance. It's a much smaller committee. And then in the Appropriations Committee, everyone serves on a subcommittee of appropriations. So this year I'm on, this is not updated. This year I actually serve on Appropriations, Health and Human Services. I have served on the General Government Appropriations in the past, but this year I'm on Health and Human Services. I also serve on Education K-12, the Ethics Committee, and Military and Veterans Affairs this year. But I won't go into all my background, but this is a presentation I do for kids, so that's why it's like, hi, I'm Julie. But, it's appropriate for adults too. So, okay, Lisa, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your committees, maybe?
Sure, yeah, so hi, it doesn't say this, but hi, I'm Lisa. That's the picture I use to scare children. I don't know. Okay. So these are my current committees. I'm on appropriations-based budget and appropriations for justice and public safety. So those are my committees. I'm a civil rights lawyer also. That I'll mention this because I work at a nonprofit that receives primarily federal grants to do our work advocating on behalf of people with disabilities. So, I could be a full-time legislator soon. We'll see. So that's my background. I will tell you, our appropriations meetings, justice and public safety, we get days upon days of agencies that relate to that particular topic come explain what's going on with them, what their budget needs are, what their budgets are, how many people they have, how many vacancies they have. It's really educational. And then we stop having those meetings and other people go write the budget, and then we find out what the budget's going to be. But it's been very educational, and as we go along, maybe we'll talk some more about kind of the needs in our agency levels that were not being met. Those are yours. Okay.
I would say in the House, the same. So we have joint appropriation subcommittee meetings. The House and the Senate, it's like the only time we have joint committee meetings. So it's like these 2 weeks at the beginning of the session, kind of where we get basically 6 hours a week. So about 12, 15 hours of presentations on the parts of the budget that you sit on. So, like, for example, in my Health and Human Services Appropriation Committee meeting, like, we have DHHS come in and present on all different things. Our fiscal staff at the General Assembly goes through each part of the budget and just basically gives really informative, good presentations to us, which would be really helpful if I actually, was going to write the budget. So, I sit through these meetings and I get all this information, and then I just kind of go back to my office and that's it. I mean, that's literally as much involvement as the minority party has in this process. It's like you go to 2 weeks of hearings and then you just you're never involved again. And I'll get into that a little bit in a second. But as you all know, a quick overview of our state government. Again, this is a presentation I've done for kids, but I think, just to make sure we're all level setting on what our responsibilities are versus everybody else. I mean, the legislation, the legislative branch obviously is where all the decisions are made about money. And I bring that up because if you know me or if you follow my work, I talk a lot about school funding and the Leandro case, which if you don't know about it, I will love to go to coffee with you and talk all about it. It's like a 31-year-old court case that basically the courts have said that the legislature owes our schools, close to $5 billion under our state constitution. But basically the legislature said, well, you can't make us appropriate money. That's our job. So I kind of bring that up in the fact that, their argument is like, we have 3 branches of government and the judiciary can't tell the legislative branch what to do or how to spend money. We can all agree to disagree on that. I disagree, but that's what their argument is at this point, and that case is still going on. But you all know the 3 branches of government and what we all do. The interesting thing about, and if you want to jump in at any time, just tap me. Yes, go ahead. We didn't practice this.
At all. No, what I want to say about Leandro is Leandro actually started when I was in law school, and I'm old. And actually, Rob Leandro, that named, is now a middle-aged lawyer himself.
Yes, that's how long we've been doing this, arguing about it. So, the state and the federal government, I think, is appropriate in this discussion because the federal government is kind of obviously, they have specific programs and things that they are responsible for, and we are supposed to be handling matters that aren't controlled by the federal government. But what's happening, and like Heba said in her presentation, is that it sounds like what's going to happen is that the federal government just wants to push down a lot of this responsibility on the state, and we cannot absorb that. And that's really not what we're meant to do. And that's kind of, and I wanted to shout out Lynn Edmonds, who's here from our school board. That's kind of what we're doing as far as the state government is pushing down a lot of the responsibility onto our counties. And so they and the school board are having to go to our Wake County commissioners much, much more than they should be, because our state government is kind of doing the same thing at the state level. And then again, like the laws, we can't contradict any federal law, but we do have some degree of autonomy. We have direct authority over local issues, and of course, federal government is only over federal. Do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, I guess on the issue of pushing costs down, like obviously part of the cost cutting that's happening is happening through this DOGE process, and what's really happening at the state level isn't preparation for taking on that responsibility. It's sort of replicating that, and there are bills and other things happening right now, including something called the DAVE Act, which has been set for reg reform in the Senate next week. That's basically trying to replicate and sort of copycat some of that. So it's not that we're preparing the field to absorb that $35 million. We're kind of doing the opposite.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the budget process. Oh, how has a bill become a law? Hopefully y'all know that, yeah. I'm just a bill, capital bill. I mean, it's honestly, if you haven't watched that in a while, it's very accurate, actually, how a bill becomes a law. It's the same thing at the federal government. I mean, it's a little different in our state legislature, but obviously we introduced the bill, I'll talk about the House, and I think it's the same, but if there's anything different, you can come back and clean up. But on the House side, the bill has to be read 3 times. So the first reading, after a bill is filed, and the reason I'm actually talking about this is because this is exactly how this budget bill is supposed to go through the process. So the budget is actually, it has a bill number, just like any other bill that goes through the legislature. This was last year's budget, and it was House Bill 259. So this year, so every year in the legislature, the budget is written by the opposite chamber. So last session, the House started the budget, so it will always be a House budget or a House bill. This year, the Senate is starting the process, so it'll be a Senate bill. So that's why you might hear different numbers, and sometimes people get confused, like, why is it a House bill and then a Senate bill? And that's why. So the bill, this budget bill will be introduced just like any other bill. It will be read into in the House chamber the first time, and then it has to pass 2 more times to go to the other chamber to cross over, as we say. So every bill should go through a committee process, and every bill has to be referred to a committee. Now, bills that I file, and I'm sure many that you file, sometimes go straight to what we call the Rules Committee. If you see that a bill went straight to the Rules Committee, that's basically where things go to die, and you'll never hear from that bill again. If a bill gets referred to a substantive committee, like health or education, it actually might have a chance of making it through the process. So and I'll talk a little bit about how you can follow a bill on our website, but that is, a really good indication of whether the leadership wants that bill to keep moving forward. Now, the budget bill will always be referred to both appropriations and finance. It has to go through both of those committees before it reaches the floor of the House. So I will stop there. Do you want to jump in on anything? I mean, so that's I'm not going to go through like other types of bills because we're here to talk about the budget, but that's basically what happens, or what it should happen, I should say. So how the North Carolina budget is created. So first of all, the Office of State Budget and Management and the General Assembly's Fiscal Research Division developed what's called a consensus revenue forecast. And that's already come out this year. I can't remember when it came out.
I want to say
Yeah, it was like January or February. February. Okay, so that came out in February, and I'm sure you could Google that and find it. I think it's on our legislative website too, if you're interested in looking at it. So that basically projects what our state revenue is going to be to give lawmakers kind of a roadmap, I guess, of like how they're going to write the budget and how much money they project that they are going to have for the upcoming fiscal year. Then state budgets submit their budget needs, and that's kind of what we go over at those appropriations meetings. Our fiscal staff will say, this is what the budget, for example, was for, let's say, the Division of Early Childhood. They do a presentation and then they will say to the committee, these are the things that you're going to need to address this year, whether it's a fiscal cliff or some federal funding that we're losing, whether it's a change in policy. So they'll kind of flag things for the committee and say, these are things you're going to have to decide this coming up year. Are you going to cut here? Are you going to change this here? So that happens during those subcommittee meetings. Then the governor recommends a budget based on information provided by state agencies. Governor Stein gave his State of the State address a few weeks ago and kind of gave a preview of what was going to be in his budget, and then it came out the next week. So I don't know if you want to show everyone that document.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
It really sort of tracks what you'll see in the general budget. There's a preliminary statement, and then there's just the different categories. And it's helpful in the sense that the governor's budget tends to put a little more narrative behind why we're doing this and that sort of thing. So do you want me to talk about, okay. Then that's.
This is Governor Cooper's from
Right.
last year, and then that's Governor.
Right,
But you
exactly.
can come up and look at these too.
Yep. I'm keeping this one, though. I do want to talk about
You
this
need
one.
that.
You got it.
So the governor is actually required to submit this budget document under our state constitution. So the governor has to present this budget. Now, the majority party, who's not in the same political party as the governor, will basically take this and put it in the garbage. They really don't care that much with because they have their own priorities. I mean, we had an appropriations meeting, a joint appropriations meeting with House and Senate, where the governor's team comes and does a presentation and kind of walks through, what's in here, like kind of a very high level, doesn't get into a lot of the details, but that's about the last time you'll probably hear about this document. At least that's my opinion. I don't know what you think. Yeah, okay. So next, the General Assembly will deliberate, or should deliberate, and pass a budget and appropriations act. And like I said, they alternate what chamber introduces that. So I'm going to talk a little at the next slide a little bit about in reality what that looks like. But let's say that this budget bill goes through each chamber. Everyone's like, oh, all 1,200 pages look great to us. No problem. We're going to pass that, and then it's going to go to the governor. So it's the same like any bill. He has the ability to veto this budget. Who was around in 2019, and do you remember what happened in 2019? Mark, I know you do. We did not pass a budget in 2019 because Governor Cooper vetoed the budget, and the Republicans could not override the veto. So we did not have a budget. And unlike the federal government, we don't have a continuing resolution. Basically, under our law, the last biennium's budget just continues for the next 2 years. But that does that include, like, the non-recurring revenue is not get paid, is that right? Yeah, so in here, there'll be recurring revenue, or recurring appropriations and non-recurring appropriations. If your appropriation was non-recurring, it just got cut off, basically. And that's a lot that's in here is non-recurring. So yeah, do you want to jump in now and take over for a second?
Words?
Yeah,
Okay,
say some words.
Let you drink some water. What's the next slide?
You want to go on?
Yeah, well, I think the thing I would add, and maybe you get into this later, but the between the House and the Senate, because it doesn't ever just go to the other body and they say this is fine. Is this what you're getting into next?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let you speak about that. I will just say, just kind of foreshadowing, that's where a lot of the fight is, and I think will be where a lot of the fight is with regard to revenue in the coming budget between the House Republicans and Senate Republicans. So I'll let Julie.
Well, I would say that, you might think that these discussions are happening, in appropriations meetings or like in this public setting, like we're having public hearings about the budget and making, having everyone come in and give their ideas about what they think should be in the budget. None of that happens. Absolutely none of that happens. Everything happens behind closed doors. It used to be that all these things used to be in public, that they did talk, and that was before even I was there. So I hear, these stories from the people that were there before I was, that, they used to have these very specific appropriation committee meetings where they would talk through, with all the members and have an open meeting about what the budget was going to be. But that really does not happen anymore. Literally, like we put on the slide, is behind locked doors where you can't even go into these rooms. And it's not even all the, it's not even all the Republican or the majority member committee members. It's just 2 or 3 people that are the chairs of those committees that are making all the decisions. So it's not even including, I think there's members of the other party who feel the same way, that they're excluded from the process as well. So it's whittling it down to literally a handful of people that are deciding our $60 billion budget at this point. And that's just not the way that it should be done. You want to add anything on that?
The only thing I would add is even so you have the appropriations chairs on all these different categories, education, justice, public safety. Even they are not given the full budget to work with. They're giving a piece of their budget because the big budget chairs, basically the people with even more power, are giving them a very limited window of where they can make adjustments from year to year. So a lot of the folks, even we consider the more powerful, who are these appropriations chairs, themselves don't really have that much authority.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. It's an even smaller circle of decision makers. So then, Senator Grafstein said, House and Senate leadership and any staff that they personally choose then go into an even smaller meeting that that some of these more limited discussions are happening. So basically the result of all this is that, we don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going on until literally this comes to my office at midnight, maybe 24 hours before we're going into appropriations meeting, where I'm supposed to be able to review that. Literally, this will be on my desk, and 8 hours later, we're supposed to go to a committee meeting and know what's in this, and how to ask questions about it. I don't know, do amendments. I mean, all those kind of things. It's crazy.
About that right there.
Yeah, so good.
So, right, and there's no accountability as to where things came from. And actually, Senator Terrence Everett, who represents Northern Wake and Granville, filed a bill this week that would require that a member's name accompany every appropriation to say where it came from, so you could trace it back, because there's a lot of mystery that's in here, and that's how you end up with so much pork as well.
I get a lot of questions. I do a lot of work around appropriations for crisis pregnancy centers. And if you don't know what that is, I'll have a whole nother coffee date with you and talk about it. But, so there's this appropriation to the certain, groups. And so I get a lot of questions from the press, well, who's pushing that? Who's putting that in the budget? I'm I have no idea. I have no idea which member is putting that in the budget, who's going to the appropriations chairs to ask for that kind of thing. And that's just, not good for democracy and for, good government. So again, these are some of the slides I wanted to repeat because I think that they're really, really good that Heber presented, is this drop in the personal income tax. And I know that sometimes it's unpopular to talk about personal income taxes dropping, and because people are well, I like low taxes, right? And so it's we as Democrats, we get called tax and spend Democrats. All you want to do is tax people, and shouldn't we just let people do what they want? But yes, of course, but we still need a robust government that's actually well-funded. And the fact that our personal income tax rate is dropping like this while our population is rising and we have more and more strain on all the services, the number one question, I want you to answer this too, the number one question email that I get, what do you think it is about? Which state agency? DMV is the number one. Josh will tell you the number one email that I get is about the DMV. I think I got 3 just today. Is there another one that you?
No, there's, and it's fair, like, it's fair, right, yeah.
But we can't make any investments in the DMV. We can't, upgrade our computers. We can't hire more people because we don't have any money to do all those things. So you're suffering because we're not able to put the revenues that we need, and it's only going to get worse. And that was the point of this presentation, is to show you how our revenues are dropping, how our revenues are going to zero from all these big corporations that are coming to North Carolina, like Apple, Google. They are literally going to pay no money to build their corporations here and to operate here, but they still use all of our services, all of our roads. They bring all of their employees, they bring all their kids, and they're not paying a dime to do so. So this is a slide that the governor presented to our appropriations meeting. So I wanted to include a few of the slides that the governor's office included. And so you can see right here that when they put together their budget, they had to consider these revenue drops. And Kristen Walker, who's the governor's budget director, said that I think this is the first time ever that we are going to have a drop in revenue in the second year of our biennium budget. We always rise every year, and this is the first year since she's been there, I believe. Isn't that what she said? In how many years? 20 years, where it's going to go down the 2.4% in the second year of our fiscal cycle. And then the income tax triggers are another thing that I won't get into because it's hard to explain. But basically, do you want to say anything about, did you talk about the triggers? No. Okay. Do you want to say real quick about, can you explain it real quick? Yeah, the income tax triggers.
You want to show that chart? Yeah. I don't know if you've worked with this chart before.
So I am not super familiar with this slide. This isn't our slide. It's from the presentation. Oh, do you want to go ahead?
Do you want to have the triggers generally? Yeah.
So, we mentioned that there are these rate reduction phase-ins, and I should actually have said that a phase-in, something that's insidious about a phase-in, or I guess a phase-out of the revenue, is that you won't necessarily be able to pinpoint, most folks, unless they know about this, won't necessarily be able to pinpoint exactly why their quality of life is going down. They won't be able to pin it to this. So rate reduction triggers are basically, if we hit this level of revenue, the next rate reduction is phased in. A rate reduction, the rate goes down. So the problem with the rate reduction trigger, and I think that's what this slide is mentioning, is that even though we have these rate reduction triggers, we have the rate reductions on a trigger, the blue line demonstrates the amount of revenue that we would need to. So I don't know what it means by revenue adequacy. Is it to meet base?
To run the state.
To run the state,
yeah.
Okay. So I didn't know if it meant to keep current levels or run the state. Yeah. So basically, what we would need to fund adequate services. And of course, I don't know their methodology. I don't know how they came up with that. So even if we hit the revenue trigger, still we're underfunding our needs and services. And I should have mentioned that lawmakers are funding at historically low levels as well.
Which is why you have a line at the DMV. And we have vacancy rates in all of our agencies, like 25, 40%, including 40% of correctional officers in our prisons. Okay. So blue is the revenue. What they were trying to demonstrate with this, and we're pointing at it, like you can see where we're pointing. What the budget director was showing with this was that we are facing, based on the solid line, are the revenues. And the argument that you've heard from the majority party has been, well, this is only going to happen, the rates are only going to go down if we hit a certain revenue target, and so therefore it's not a problem because the economy is going to keep growing and that will produce more revenue. But what this chart shows is that when you produce more revenue, which is the growth that they're talking about, that's actually worse, and you have a worse outcome because you hit the revenue target earlier and you're losing more money. So even as the economy is growing, it's almost worse for it to do better from the point of view of state revenue. And all of the lines, of course, are below the blue line. So all of that means that there's this gap in between what we need and what the revenues are going to be.
Yeah, I think their methodology on revenue adequacy is basically, if you can't read that, it's like expenditures plus CPI, which is consumer price index, and the population growth rate. So it's basically like, this is what we need to keep up with CPI and our population rate. And you can see every line is way under that. And so and also I just want to explain what a trigger is. Basically, if you don't know, so there's in our law right now, if you hit a certain revenue stream, our individual income tax hits a trigger and it will drop even another like 0.25% or something. So every time we hit one of these revenue plateaus, your taxes are going to go down. We're going to keep going down in our individual income tax as at the same time that our corporate income tax is going down and our population is going up and the cost of running our state is going up. And this is why I wanted to do this, because I think we have a serious problem coming up with this fiscal cliff. You might have heard that term, that's coming up in a combination with potential federal cuts that Heba mentioned. So this is the last slide that the governor, the last slide that I'm going to share that the governor shared is their concerns with the state budget are that we have less revenue in the second year. We have $50 billion of needs in Western North Carolina from Hurricane Helene. We were going to go to 8. Oh, okay, just want to make sure. I know, thank you. And then this uncertainty around federal funding. So Heba already showed this slide. I mean, we know that this is basically where we are. We're facing some really serious problems coming up. And so now we're going to answer some of your questions that you submitted. So if you have questions now, since I'm finished with our main presentation, feel free to continue to submit those. And I'll turn it to Senator Grafstein to maybe answer the first one. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Choosing at random, how does the legislature expect to make up lost revenue?
Good question.
Yes. Okay, good night.
Thank you very much, good night.
Yeah, and scene. How does I don't know what the majority's thinking is. Here's what my fears are and what my suspicions are, that we see more of what we've seen. So one of the things that's been happening and why we're currently underfunding our needs, we have, as I mentioned, vacancy rates 25 to 40%, some really key agencies. It's because state employees' salaries have been reduced. And I've said this in other contexts, and I'll say it here. We've seen a lot of just sudden cuts at the federal level, right? Just dramatic firings. But really what's been going on for a long time, I'd say 12 to 14 years in North Carolina, is sort of a slow process that's just the same, essentially, which has been state employees have lost retirement benefits. Their health insurance is not quite what it used to be, just a lot of benefit losses, but then also stagnating salaries. And the philosophy, somebody asked the Senate Majority Leader last year, about state salaries, and the raise that was being offered was not that substantial, and was asked, should there be a higher raise for state employees? And his response was, if we raise public sector salaries, that'll drive up salaries in the private sector. And he was saying that like it was a bad thing. So the salaries are being kept sort of artificially low to keep costs down and to make it look like the state is more flush than it actually is. Again, my opinion. So I think that's part of it. There's just a different philosophy about what government is for. And what we're seeing, again, my opinion with the public schools is, less and less in terms of revenue in the public schools, but then putting money into private school opportunity scholarship vouchers, $800 million, that would fund a lot of things that we need in our public schools. I think it's a philosophy that's driving toward privatization and taking money out of the public sector, and that's why we're seeing some of the numbers. The other thing I think is that there's going to be a push for video lottery terminals as a revenue source. So these are literally just lottery terminals at gas stations, bars, wherever, that really are a very regressive kind of tax, right? That people who maybe are not of the highest means are going to spend money on and be funding the things that we used to fund with things like the corporate income tax. That did not answer the question at all. Okay. But
we don't have an answer.
Yeah, but the answer is I think there's just a belief in cutting, and that cutting is also, I think, going to be used, and it was used last year as a reason that we should have casinos and casino revenue, and that fell apart for a variety of reasons. But that's, I think, where we would go, because it's a philosophical approach, I think, of just gutting government and relying on these really unstable income streams. It's just a bad philosophy. Yep.
I'll take the next one. Yeah. Well, I would just add that that's kind of what we heard during the sports betting, the online sports betting debates, and they just came out, I think today or yesterday, that we did bring in about $130 million in taxes through just 1 year of online sports gambling. But I don't know about you all, but I don't want to bring in revenue that way. It's harmful and hurtful to people, but
can I add something?
Yeah, I wanted to add that gambling is a really weird topic in the General Assembly because it's very strange bedfellows. Like, it's either the really conservative people and the really progressive people that agree on this. Like and I consider myself on the more progressive end, but I don't like gambling and I don't like online sports gambling. Because I have a 20-year-old son that I don't want to get sucked into that. But there's a lot of Democrats and Republicans who like it. So it's a very weird topic. So I don't know how you feel about it.
I voted no, honestly, and which is not a popular, but partly because we didn't legalize sports betting. We just gave away a monopoly to 10 companies, I think. We gave away 10 contracts. You and I can't set up a betting pool. That's still illegal. So it's a monopoly situation. But also that 100 and whatever million was generated based on, I think, $13 billion in bets. Right, so 132 million is, what's that?
13 billion?
Billion,
Yeah.
Right, because that tax that came in is 18%, I think, or 14% of the revenue to the betting company, right? Which means that 86% or whatever is money that left this state and is never coming back, right? So probably we're talking about $800 million that's not going to the local grocery store or the local whatever. It's elsewhere, and that's tax revenue that we also aren't receiving. So it's a scam. I'm sorry, I voted no.
That was her floor speech. All right, we have 2 questions on education, so of course I want to take those. One person said, schools are already underfunded, especially in rural and poorer districts. How do vouchers impact the underfunded districts, and what are the impacts to North Carolina education with the elimination of the Department of Education? And somebody else also said, how will this affect, if I go to a UNC school, how will education be affected by cuts? I would say that as far as vouchers, and Senator Grafstein mentioned that, is that, last session we greatly expanded our private school voucher program and have now basically committed ourselves to $10 billion with a B dollars in private school vouchers over the next 10 years or so, I believe. And last year alone, at the end of last year, to expand the program to basically now eliminate the income cap. So before it used to be you had to make under a certain income to get the voucher. Now anybody can get it. Billionaire, millionaire, go in and get your free money to send your kid to any school. And now you can get one even if you already are attending that school. So I went to Cary Academy for 10 years, or I guess not that long, 5 years, and I've been paying it, no problem. Well, now I can still get the voucher and get some money knocked off. So the expansion of the voucher program, along with this fiscal cliff and the federal cuts, is a perfect storm for our public schools. And that's what I keep saying, is that these three things are terrible and they're going to affect our schools dramatically. I'm sure Lynn will talk to you afterwards if you want to talk to her in more detail. I know they're in the middle of their budgeting process right now as well. The federal Department of Education, if they do cut the funding, I mean, right now I believe it's just staffing cuts that are happening right now, but if they cut federal education funding, that is going to be devastating to our schools, especially our kids with disabilities, our lower income schools, our Title I schools. I think that I heard that I think the number was like in the 80,000 number of school employees in North Carolina that are paid for by federal funds. That's a lot of people that will not be, and I'm sure their local districts are not going to be able to pick up, and pay their salaries if their salaries are gone. So I will say that yes, unfortunately, to the student that might be attending a UNC school, you might see some cuts at those in the UNC schools. I actually just heard today from a student that goes to the UNC School of Social Work, and they are already seeing programs, they are cut. She's worried about the school totally being cut because they're losing so many federal funds that run all their programs for their students. So it's not looking good. I hate to be so negative, but I think everything's going to get touched by this. So. You want to add anything or take your next question?
Sure. The only thing I would add on the opportunity scholarships is that we
Don't call them that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Vouchers. Public school revenue sucking vouchers. Yes. Is that better? Nothing. It's not recorded, so we're fine. I know, I'm joking. Thanks, Mona. The only thing I would add on that is that we know for a fact that a lot of especially the bigger private schools that are taking a lot of these vouchers, also just raise their prices, right, when the vouchers passed, because...
Why not?
Why not, right? Some buy a lot, right. So I took this question on any discussion of increasing pay. Thank you. It's now practically a full-time job at pitiful wages, also true. Our job, yeah. Yeah, our job. We make $13,800 and something a year, taxable.
But our taxes are going down. So
That's right. We're rolling.
We're all good.
So it's no longer a 30 or 60-day session as pay is rated. Please give yourselves the increase to encourage others to be able to afford to run for office or vote in time limits for sessions. So in terms of any discussions of increasing pay, this is the third rail of politics. There's actually a bill that Senator Bergen, who's a Republican from Harnett County, filed that would increase pay, have term limits, and limit session length. And his whole theory behind that is exactly that things are out of control, and if you couple pay raise with those other limitations, that it's more palatable. The issue is that it's... you're inviting somebody to run a campaign against you that says, they just wanted to increase their, it doesn't really matter, that it's 13,000 to 16,000 or whatever. His bill actually would tie, I think this is brilliant, would tie legislative pay to first-year teacher pay, right? And so that would, I think that's really smart, but it's not going to go anywhere because it's become this political problem. 100% agree. The legislature is filled with people who either have independent wealth or they have the kinds of jobs where they don't have to, be there for things, and then there's those of us who just kind of piece it together the best we can. So anyway, it's a problem, and I don't really see a solution in the short term.
Don't have much to add to that other than, I think there's Republicans and Democrats who feel like we need to make a change, but nobody is brave enough to step out and actually do it. And until that happens, I think we're going to get stuck with our low pay. So the next question is around public transportation, around a specific project. So I'm going to, is this you? I'm going to have to follow up with you and check on this. But I wanted to bring this up. He asked about a specific transportation project, and I think that's probably the second or third category of questions I get in my office is around different, DOT projects. We need a traffic light here. We need a road here. We need this done. And I did want to mention that the transportation budget is actually separate, right, from this budget. It's in a whole nother separate pot of money called, what is it called?
Transportation money.
Oh, I thought it had like a specific name or something.
No, it's
Okay, well, it's a transportation budget, the pot of money, that all the money for, because the way that we fund our roads is through, gas taxes and all those kind of things. So they have to kind of keep that separate. So there is a system called STIP that basically is how they rank projects to spend that money on. And so I don't know if you saw recently, the DOT just came out and reordered, and I'm sure council members from Apex will be very familiar with this because it affects them a lot, because I'm sure they get the same kind of questions. And I did a town hall that some of you were at last year in Holly Springs because I wanted to make sure that my constituents understood how decisions are made around roads, because it's a combination of state and municipalities and counties that make those decisions based on what the road is. If it's a state road, it's one thing. If it's a town road, it's another thing. We have things called orphan roads that you may not even have heard of before. So those are roads that nobody takes care of them, and they're stuck with the homeowners that live on them, which I'm sure in your district you probably have a lot of those. It's a lot in our rural, unincorporated areas of the county. But a lot of the projects have gotten pushed back even more, and I believe they attributed it to lack of funding and rising costs. Isn't that what they said? Yeah. So if you live in Apex, they've been talking about expanding 64 for many years, and that got pushed off another 2 or 3 years, I believe. So unfortunately, I don't have any good news on that either, but I will follow up with you on this. You want to take another one?
Yeah. Did you have something?
Do you know why they don't toll all of 540 and just us?
I do.
Can you share that with us?
Boy, did I hear about that knocking doors last year. So the question is about why they toll part of the 540 and not all of it. Southern Wake County is tolled. And the reason is they built the top part of 540 and built it with existing funds. And the only way the kind of the Southern Wake County part was able to be built was because of the toll, having the toll money to repay some of the bond. Well, I mean, we can try, right? I don't know when that will be, but right. But that's
We might not be around
that's
anymore.
what I've been told about the reason for the tolls. The only thing I wanted to add on the transportation piece, there's a funding formula and I actually, to me, putting pieces of the budget in different pockets doesn't make a lot of sense. Transportation is a huge piece, and that's why I think we try to fund it separately so it doesn't feel like such a big part of the budget, but it's still money, right? So it's mostly gas tax, which actually the revenues are going down because fuel efficiency, right? A little bit of it is people using EVs, and now there's now a fee that's associated with when you buy an EV, your registration fee includes an EV fee because you're not paying the gas tax. And so that's a whole other controversial piece.
Do you want to answer that?
Sure. What happens to the rainy day fund that the legislature has been so proud of?
Just the first part.
Just the first part?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So, right, we have a rainy day fund. I'm not really sure even there are just these pockets of reserves that we have. This has been part of the argument around Helene recovery, right? There are a lot of people, myself included, and some of the, I would say the Democrats in the western part of the state who have said, the people there need money now. We can't wait for federal funds to come down to fund things like small business and so on. So we've had, I'm not even sure how big the rainy day fund is, but I think we put about $1 billion so far into Helene recovery, which is, I think, a small part of the rainy day fund. So, side note, the rainy day fund is built on the backs of the people who work in our state who have not been getting a decent wage for a long time. So it's a rainy day fund that we can be proud of, but actually, I would have a lot of savings if I didn't pay my mortgage, right? It's not really something you can't have one and not have the other. So what happened to it is still there, and We still have part of the rainy day fund. We're not spending it at the rate that I think people in the western part of the state really need. I'm not really sure what else to add about that. It's a pot of money, and there are arguments to be made that you do need a certain level of reserves, but if you're not going to use them for something like Helene, I'm not sure what they're for.
There's about 5 or 6 questions that are very similar, so I'm gonna try to kind of.
Why?
Yeah, why? Just why? I mean, they're all kind of around, how can we best advocate for restoring the budget? I've been attending meetings, committee meetings and speaking. Is this effective? How can you break the wall between other legislators and other parties to gain trust and common sense solutions? So these are all kind of similar. And this is a good way to kind of end our presentation. And of course, the last question is what gives you hope? Because I know a lot of what we talked about tonight is very negative, and I apologize for that. I wish I could be more positive, but I think that it's really important for people to understand the realities, of what we're facing right now in our state. We can't sugarcoat it or gloss over it. A lot of people like to do that. They like to gaslight you into thinking that things are good and you're getting a tax cut. Isn't that wonderful? And all these other things. But I think that when you really dig down into the numbers and you see, what's actually happening in our state, and you're emailing us about why can't we get this road built, or why can't I get an appointment at the DMV? Why can't I do this? It's all, this is why. What's happening right now, this is why. And you're going to hear probably a lot more, like Senator said, about privatization of, agencies. That's the solution. The solution is we need to privatize public, schools. We need to privatize the DMV. We need to privatize, prisons. I mean, that's, maybe what we're moving toward here. And we just got an email from the Department of Public Safety that, our correction officer salary is the 3rd lowest in the entire country. And it's scary. I mean, it is scary to think that those people, why would you ever want to be a correction officer when it's 50% vacancies in those prisons? And you're dealing with people, that are, have a lot of mental health issues and other things. And it's just a bad, bad situation. So as far as what you can do, and all these questions kind of hit on that, is that I have been encouraging, I've been working with Mark and other groups that, and if you want to talk, he's probably the one that wrote that, right? He's been coming down to committee meetings, and I love it. I keep seeing you on TV. I keep seeing you on the committee meeting live streams. Keep it up. Because they keep seeing you, and they're going to be like, there's that guy again. He's here to give us a piece of his mind. And we need more of that, because I think, the budgeting process has become very secret, and so has everything else. It's not just the budget process, it's committee meetings. It's giving literally they give you a minute. They give him a minute to speak on a bill, like say the concealed carry bill, this really bad gun bill that's going through. 1 minute? I mean, what can you say in a minute? And then they literally cut you off. They will jerk the microphone away from you and be like, sorry, you're done. It's that kind of thing that just gives people the bad impression of government. It gives people a bad impression of democracy, but keep at it because they don't want you coming down there. And so keep doing it. So I would say, yes, it's effective, and you need to keep showing up. They're having pack the gallery days where Wednesday in the House, there was our entire gallery was filled with people. That is unusual, y'all. It's usually 2 or 3 people are sitting up there watching. I love it when there's all these people there watching because they need to know you're watching and what they're doing. I would say that as far as breaking down walls between legislators, I would just say it's gotten more partisan. This is my 7th year there. In my first term, I got a lot more Republicans to sponsor bills with me and work together on bills. It's getting harder and harder to find those people who will put their name on a bill with a Democrat. I don't know. Do you have any advice on that? Have you find a secret to working across the aisle?
I mean, I think there are certain places where you can find at least in the Senate, there are still folks who will sign on to things. You know, I'm only in my second term, so my first term, I had none of those relationships. Now I've got a few. We'll see if the bills go anywhere. I've got a couple people to sign on, but it is around non-controversial things or things where there's some bipartisan support, like services for people with disabilities and stuff like that. So there's a little windows of that. I will say, like, it's a very strange place to be, the legislative building, because you truly are among people who are, on the one hand, warm human beings that you can have a conversation with, and they're decent. But then you watch that, you know, people try to tell them stories about their lives, and it just, you know, then the politics kicks in and they have to kind of put the wall up, right? So it's a hard thing to do. So it takes time to develop those relationships, but there's also, autocracy is not a new thing, right? We've seen this at the state level also, that there's the people who are sort of, you know, lower level even in the majority party, they have consequences if they cross lines too, right? And so it's not that they are personally vindictive against us, it's that they have to, if they want their bills to work, if they want a committee chair, they have to comply with certain things. And there's a certain level of control that that's being exercised that I think really hinders a lot of what could be happening kind of at the legislator to legislature level across the aisle.
Why don't you share and I'll share.
Okay.
We'll end on a hopeful note.
Well, yeah, what gives you hope is the question. So if I can go back to the last set of questions about what to do, first of all, yes is the answer. So whatever, and some of you have heard me say this before, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Don't look for the perfect strategy. Do all the things you can do. And the other thing I would say is that the only thing that matters in politics is narrative, right? What's the story that's getting told? And I think the story that's getting told more and more is people showing up to things and being unwilling to accept what's happening at the federal level, what's happening at the state level. It's not just Mark. Mark is there most consistently, but we have a lot of people who show up pushing the narrative that there's not an inevitability to the power structure that we have right now, I think is important. People need to know that there are folks like these young people in the back of the room who are watching and who have the, I would say, the clean slate of mind to understand that this is not okay and to speak out about it. Like a lot of us who are older have more invested in not sticking our necks out. But you know, what more of us need to, because they're doing it because they have to. They have no other choice. What gives me hope besides these nice folks back here? First of all, like, we get this question a lot. Maybe we seem really cheery. I don't know. That's probably not it. So what gives me hope? Like, what gives you hope is kind of, I want to turn it around. Like, I go out into my garden, right? Like, I go outside and I realize nobody's having a political fight in my backyard, right? My neighbor brought me some Rice Krispie treats. That was nice. You know, like, what gives me hope is, like, actually the real world is still people. Like, it's just still us, and and we get to decide what happens next, right? So, like, keep doing that and seeing people do that and realize that truly what democracy is that, you know, all that money that's being collected and how we're going to spend it together, that's what democracy is. Like, I actually don't think capitalism is an inherently bad thing, but it's supposed to be coupled with people having the power to decide how we organize our society and how we spend our money. And when we don't have that, that's when capitalism has gone off the rails to some extent. So, oh God, that's on tape now. Okay. Okay, well, anyway, so that what gives me hope is you. You give me hope, and just the reality that this is a moment in time, and it's a moment in time we get to be in, to be part of an important fight.
The easiest way for you to give up your power is to be convinced that you don't have any. You have power, and never let them convince you that you don't. So that's my first word of advice, one of my favorite quotes. My second is rest is a form of resistance. Never wear yourself out. Mark, please take a break. Don't come down every day. But rest, you know, like this is a marathon, not a sprint, as they say. don't expect change overnight. And a lot of people are like, why isn't this working? Why isn't everything changing? But we know that acts of resistance and movements take a long time. And so, the budget this year might suck again. And maybe we'll get a veto, and maybe we'll hold the veto, and we'll be able to force them into some, actual negotiations with us. That's the hope this year. But, this is going to take a long time to make the changes that, HEBA is advocating for, that lots of other people are advocating for. So just stick with it. Yeah.
Can I have one thing to what you just said before you finish?
Yeah, sure.
Before you get too far past the point, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. I've heard something really great recently. It's actually a relay, right? And we're handing the baton off, so it's partly we're in the relay right now. Exactly. Yeah.
If I need to take a break, I'm I call her, can you go to this event instead of me? Things like that. But what gives me hope is, thank you guys, the Apex Teen Democrats. I love seeing teenagers and young people more involved with politics. So thank you all for coming out. And just a quick, stupid story, but it did give me a lot of hope. I'm a big Taylor Swift fan, so is my friend Lynn. And my friends and I went to this Taylor Swift dance party a couple of weeks ago. And, well, that's a whole nother story. Anyway, it was, I didn't realize it was 18 and over at this thing, so I was probably one of the oldest people there, but I literally had tears in my eyes because it was this room full of young, all ages people dancing and singing at the top of their lungs, their favorite artist. And it just was this is what the world should be. We should all be dancing and singing together. And nobody asked what political party we were with. Nobody knew who I was or, anybody in the room. And it just made me feel so good. So please, do something like that just to give yourself, hope. And when you look around rooms like that, you're this is what our country is supposed to be. So anyway, thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. I hope you learned something. If we didn't get to your question, and I know there was a couple that had some really specific questions, please come up, write your name and your email on the back of your card, and we will definitely follow up with you.